Well, hello fellow crafters and fellow artists. This is going to be a fun exercise, I hope, for you guys on our watercolor journey. You know, we've learned about the paints themselves, we've learned about the brushes, the brush strokes. We've learned about graded washes, we've learned about flat washes, we've learned about dry brushing, we've learned about wet and wet techniques. So we've got the basic terms, what they mean, and how to apply them down. So now it's time to start putting all of that into practical application, which means it is time to start painting pictures. I hope you are as excited as I am. That doesn't mean we're not going to go back to some of the basics. Let me tell you, I'm reading 2 books. And this is one of the exercises that actually they're very similar in both books, written by 2 different authors. The first one is Watercolor for Dummies by Colette Pitcher, and she has a very similar exercise to this, but this one is more closely related to the one in the book that I'm reading now, Watercolor Basics by Jack Reed. So anyway, they both have a kind of monochromatic snow scene picture with a fuzzy background with trees in the background and then trees in the foreground and a little river coming from back to front. Both books have that type of exercise in them. Jack's is a little bit more in depth, so that's the one I'm working on today. But we're only going to use 2 colors for this. We're going to use ultramarine and burnt sienna, and that is the only 2 colors we're going to use. The brushes I used were Daler and Rowney 1/2 inch flat. This is just from Plaid Crafts. It's not a watercolor brush, but it's about a 3/4 inch. It was the one that was the right size for what I was doing. Then I used a number 12 Mimic round, a number 2 liner brush by Mimic. Also, they're Creative Mark brushes. And then this number 3 round by Daler and Rowney just for my signature. So that's the brushes I used. We actually probably could have gotten by with just a couple of those brushes. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this painting tutorial. Again, it looks very nice, and it looks actually more complicated than it is. It's actually a very, very simple exercise in watercolor. So let's get started. I mixed up a medium wash of burnt sienna and ultramarine. They make a pretty natural gray, and so we're gonna just do our horizon, or our sky rather, that's what I'm looking for, our sky, our kind of our background of our picture, and this mid-tone to light wash of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And we're only going to do about the top third of the paper, and I'm working towards me, and I'm doing a flat wash, and I'm making sure and keeping the moisture and the pigment even. So I'm having to go back and load my brush back up and overlap from one stroke across the paper to the next. So that way I get a nice even flat wash. Now my first try in the picture you saw me, or you're going to see me doing, and the rest of this video is actually the first picture. This is number 2 because I forgot to film the background. I'm so sorry. I forgot to hit record. I don't know what else to say. I forgot to hit record. My apologies. But while this is still wet, I'm gonna get some more of the ultramarine and burnt sienna on around a brush, and I'm just gonna put some trees in the background, of course whiter at the base and thinner going up, and it's going to fuzz out because that sky is still wet, so this is just gonna fuzz out into the background. And I'm having trouble, I'm working upside down. Let me turn this around because that would be just so much easier for me. Anyway, so we're just dotting in some trees into this wet background before it gets too dry, and it's starting to want to dry up on me. So I'm just kind of just gently touching the tip of my brush to my paper and just moving it back and forth and getting skinnier as I go up, so that it takes, you know, that kind of natural form of a tree. And then I'm making sure I'm varying the lengths, the height of the trees, so that they don't look like clone trees. And this paper is not great for moisture control. It dries really quickly. So this is something I would really recommend you work on, a little bit better paper and a cold press paper, and something that kind of holds your moisture a little better, because this Fabriano Studio hot press is not great for that. Now, it's great for if you're a stamper and whatnot. It's great to stamp on and then just kind of color those images in, either with markers or with watercolors. But for doing watercolor painting, it's not necessarily the best. But anyway, so that's how I put the background in, and now we're going to switch over to the first painting I did and show you how we complete the foreground of the picture. And now I'm going to add, I'm going to get a, this is a number 12 round, and I'm going to get even more of the ultramarine blue. And the burnt sienna, and I'm going to make this mixture even darker and inkier than it was before. And this is one of those techniques where it might have been easier for me to work directly out of the tube rather than working from dried paint. Might have been easier to mix these values. Okay, now I don't want this to go too cool. I want to warm this up a little bit more with some more of that burnt sienna, because we don't want it to, the cooler tones should be in the background, and it should warm up as it gets closer. So we're going to actually make this a little warmer with more burnt sienna than ultramarine blue. There we go, that's looking about right. And we're going to put in some foreground trees. Okay, I'm going to switch over to a 3/4 inch flat brush, and I'm going to take some of this inky mixture, and I'm going to lighten it up a little bit with water to be about the same tonal value as the sky. And we're going to put a lake in. And now we're going to cause that to flow into a river. Starting thinner at the back and then widening out as it comes forward. And I'm going to widen that out even further. Okay. And while that's still wet, I'm going to go back to a round brush, about the same size, and again I'm going to darken this wash here even further with the ultramarine and burnt sienna. It's okay if this one leans a little cool because it is going to be in a reflection in water. But we do want it a little bit darker value than the trees that we painted. And yes, it's kind of like a wet and wet wash, and it is going to fuzz out the image, and that's what we want, absolutely. That's what's going to give it some realism. And I went outside a little bit. I'm just trying to blot it up. I think the easiest thing to do is just going to be to kind of bring the river we're going to leave that be for now, because I think that is just about as good as it's going to get. And we're going to switch to our rigger brush, and we're going to put in a couple of dead trees. And again, for that, I'm going to darken up this puddle of burnt sienna and ultramarine by adding more pigment to it. And I apologize on that palette cam that this kind of dances around, but I'm going to get our rigger brush full of the mixture. Now, even a dead tree is thicker at the bottom and thinner at the top. It gets skinnier as it grows older. I learned that from Cinnamon Cooney, the art Sherpa. So no matter what configuration of branches you put in here, as long as they're thicker towards the tree and thinner as they go out, they will look much more realistic. And I don't feel like my mixture is dark enough, so I'm going to go over the base of the tree a little bit again so that it gets a little darker. And I'm going to try and follow the thought process that the light is coming from this direction, and that's what's causing it to cast those trees to cast a shadow. So I'm going to try and put in a little bit of a shadow of the tree, but kind of go in this direction. And according to the book that I was telling you about, the reflection should be darker than the actual tree. So I'm going to go in and make that a little bit darker. Put a few more branches in here. Alright, and how about we give him a little friend or two. Maybe this little guy here will just be a little twiggier. Yes, I just cross-contaminated my paints, but I really just need this inkier and darker. Now, because this paper does wick up moisture fast, I didn't feel the need to take a dryer to this and dry it. But that would probably not be a bad idea, is to go ahead and dry it before you start putting your little dead trees in. Otherwise, this will feather and fade out into the wet, the paper that's still wet. But because this paper dries so quickly, I'm not having that problem as much. So I'm just being really careful about my placement of these little twigs. Okay, I'm going to leave that little dead guy alone because I could just sit here and aggravate him all afternoon. So now I'm just going to flick in some little grassy stuff. Here and there around my tree bases. And he's not going to have much of a shadow in the water, but he still needs a little bit. Make sure you're, like I just put way too much water down there, but this is almost dry brushing what we're doing here with the flicking in the grass. So I don't have a whole lot of pigment on my brush. Alright, the only thing left to do is to sign your work. And for this I just like a really tiny round brush. This one's about a 3. I do better with signing my name with a little round brush than I do with a rigger or a liner. And that's it. You just made a painting with 2 colors of paint. You've got depth in your painting and the values. They get lighter, they got darker. We did a flat wash of sorts. Mine kind of went a little awry on me. And in that flat wash, we did a wet and wet. We did a wet on dry with the river, with the little lake in the background and the river, and with the trees. We did a dry brushing technique, a fairly dry brushing technique, putting in the twigs and the little grassy part. We did some more wet and wet when we put the shadows of the trees into the river. We practiced a lot of techniques in this little bitty painting. And no, it's not hyper realistic, but it's pretty, and it's something that you could actually put a little frame in and it would be perfectly lovely and nobody would question whether it was high art or not, you know. So these are good. These little exercises, I tell you, I'm really enjoying the book. And these are some of the exercises that are found in it. So we discuss a particular topic of watercolor painting and how to do it. And then we get an exercise to put that into use. So I highly recommend both books that I'm reading are doing that. So I highly recommend both of those books. They're not simplistic. I mean, they're simple enough to follow along, but they're not simplistic and talking to you like you're a 3-year-old, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So they're simple enough to follow along, but they're still going to appeal to your intelligence sense, I guess is the best way to say it. So I hope you enjoyed this little follow along with me tutorial about how to do a simple watercolor picture without tracing anything in, without any real technical skills, because I can promise you as of right now I don't have a whole lot of technical skills in drawing or in any other arena. So thank you so much for watching. Again, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful, and if you're a beginner like me, get busy, start painting. It's time. We're going to start diving into some real meat and potatoes painting exercises now. Anyway, if you would like to help support Janine's Craft Room, there's going to be an iCard right about here, and you can click on that. It'll bring you to my home page where you can make a donation to my channel and help me to bring more content to you, because art supplies and craft supplies, as I'm sure you know, aren't cheap. They don't come cheap. And doing YouTube production, I do go through a lot more supplies than I normally would, just say for my own personal use. And if you haven't yet, my picture is going to be right about here. And if you would click on my picture, it'll take you again to my homepage where you can subscribe to my channel so you never miss a video. Anyway, I just want you guys to, and I know I say anyway a lot, but I want you to know that I appreciate you. I'm so happy that you show up and watch my videos. And as always, have a very blessed day. Bye now.